50 years ago, in 1974, I was working with the Hudson Institute with Herman Kahn, and my colleagues there were a number of Mossad agents who were being trained. Uzi Arad was there, and he became the head of Mossad and is currently the main advisor to Benjamin Netanyahu. So all of what is happening now was described a long time ago. And Herman was known as a futurist. He was Dr. Strangelove in the movie. That was all based for him on his theories of atomic war, but he was also the main theorist behind Vietnam. Nobody seems to have noticed that what is happening in Gaza and the West Bank now is all based on what was the U.S. strategy during the Vietnam War. I could see that the intention from the very beginning was to get rid of the Palestinians and indeed to use Israel as the basis for U.S. control of Near Eastern oil. That was the constant discussion of that. From the American point of view, it was Israel as part of the oil. So Herman's analysis was on systems analysis. You define the overall aim, and then you work backward. How do you do it? Well, you can see what the Israeli policy is today. First of all, you isolate the Palestinians in strategic hamlets. That's what Gaza had already been turned into for the last 15 years. It's been carved up into districts with requiring electronic passes from one sector to another to go into Israel, to go to Jerusalem, or to go to Israel for jobs to work. The aim all along has been to kill them, or first of all, to make life so unpleasant for them that they'll emigrate. That's the easy way. Why would anyone want to stay in Gaza when what's happening to them is what's happening today? You're going to leave. But if they don't leave, you're going to have to kill them, ideally by bombing, because that minimizes the domestic casualties. And Israel doesn't want its soldiers to die any more than Americans do. So the American form of war is, as it was in Vietnam, is bombing them. For the United States, what they wanted was the oil reserves in the Middle East. And again, I heard the phrase, "You're our landed aircraft carrier" in Israel.
Israel is essentially a floating aircraft carrier or a non-floating aircraft carrier for the United States. America works with the Israelis and uses Israeli assets in order to pursue targets in the Middle East.
Uzi Arad, the future Mossad head, would be very uncomfortable at this because he wanted Israel to be run by the Israelis, but they realized that for Israel to get by with the money that it needed for its balance of payments, it had to be in a partnership with the United States. So what you're seeing today isn't simply the work of one man, of Benjamin Netanyahu. It's the work of the team that President Biden has put together. It's the team of Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, Blinken, and the whole deep state, the whole neocon group behind them, Victoria Nuland and everyone. They're all self-proclaimed Zionists. And they've gone over this plan for essentially America's domination of the Near East for decade after decade.
And I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
But as the United States learned in the Vietnam War, populations protest, and the U.S. population protested against the Vietnam War. What the Biden administration wants to avoid is the situation that President Johnson had in 1968. Any hotel, any building that he went to give a speech for his re-election campaign, there were crowds shouting, "LBJ, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today?" President Johnson had to take the servants' entrance to get away from the press so that nobody would see what he was doing, and essentially he went on television and resigned. Well, President Biden has approved Netanyahu's plan. The first people you have to kill are the journalists. If you're going to to commit genocide, you have to realize that you don't want the domestic U.S. population or the rest of the world to oppose the U.S. and Israel. You kill the journalists, and for the last, ever since the October 2nd El Aqsa event, you've had one journalist per week killed in Israel. That's part of it. The other people you don't want, if you're going to bomb them, you have to start by bombing the hospitals and all of the key centers. That also was part of the idea of the Vietnam War. How do you destroy a population? This was all worked out in the 1970s when people were trying to use systems analysis to think, how do you work back and see what you need? So the United States building these piers, one reason it's doing it is it can pretend that it can say, we're not building the piers, Israeli property owners, to have yachts. We're going to deliver food. But by the time we finish building the piers, there'll be no more Gazans. That's the whole point. By building the piers, they've enabled Israel to prevent the food trucks from coming in from the south. So building the piers is a means of pretending to help without doing anything at all to help actually develop food to Israel. So, yes, they've all throughout the news, there have been statements by the Israeli real estate companies saying Gaza could have been a nice place to live if there weren't Arabs in it. And now, if we can clear the land of Arabs, make it a land without those people, then this is a wonderful property, and it has natural gas to help the Israeli balance the payments. So the whole idea is to make this a center of Israel luxury development. You not only want beachfront property, you want docks for the buyers to have a place to tie up their yacht. So the question is, how is Gaza going to exist? Either it's going to be all Israeli, and the Gazians will be forced to flee. The Israelis want them to flee by boats and to be sunk in the Mediterranean, just like after America and France destroyed Libya. The Libyans tried to flee in boats, and they were sunk. So either they will drown, or they will somehow work their way into a prison camp that Egypt and its leader is setting up for Gazian refugees. And then the Gazians will somehow try to gain entry into Europe or other countries. So you can expect a huge influx of Gazians into Europe. Some people have suggested, well, now that Ukraine is turning into a land without a people, maybe either the Gazans who can turn Ukraine over to the Palestinians, or we could give it to the Israelis, saying, well, this is your ancestral land, where this is where all of the pogroms that started Zionism begun. Now you can go back, and there are no more Ukrainians to have pogroms against you. Maybe the Israelis should go to Ukraine. One population or the other has to emigrate.